can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Now, sitting beside me is Ray Mooney. Ray Mooney, you might know of Ray Mooney. Ray Mooney is regarded as an important playwright, novelist and screenwriter. And he's studied at the Victorian, where have I written that down? He's studied at the Victorian College of Arts, and he's lectured at the Holmes Glen TAFE, the VCA Film and TV School, VCA meaning the Victorian Centre of Arts.
Yes.
Just
I was trying to work it out myself, yeah.
Not an acronym being only a word that you can pronounce. You can't pronounce VC. Anyhow, so this is Ray Mooney, and to put this in perspective, now Ray knows I'm going to ask him this, to put this in perspective, Ray had a fairly checkered career before he became rehabilitated himself and became the important playwright, novelist and screenwriter he is. I've got a feeling, Ray, you've lived up until you transgressed a fairly privileged life.
Yeah, definitely.
You came from a family of good standing and good reputation.
Yes, my parents were publicans.
Yes.
Yeah.
You became married. You married.
Yes.
And you have how many children?
Three children.
Three children.
I've been married a couple of times. And
yep.
3 children.
So, Ray, then I think you say that you had a marriage breakdown, and this sent you on a spiral of pretty ugly past when you were a youth. You raped a 16-year-old girl, physically assaulted her seriously, and then raped her again. Yeah. And as a consequence, Ray, you did 12 years, just over 12 years at Pentridge for that.
I was sentenced to 12 years. I only served 7.5.
I see. Yeah. Now, I don't want to labour on this,
okay.
but I don't know that. So why did you only serve 7.5? Was that considered a lenience? Was that considered getting off leniently, or you were a model prisoner? You obviously are a model prisoner because you got some degrees and studied in Pentridge to try and rehabilitate your past, I presume, Ray.
Sure. Yeah. Look, there were times. I'll go back to the rape in a moment. Yep. But there were times inside when I would have been assessed as a model prisoner, but there were other times when I was assessed as a radical troublemaker. But ultimately, I served 7.5 years. Yep. Because the sentence I was given, and it was a justifiable sentence, was 12 with a minimum of 9.
Yeah, I see.
And in my day, you could earn remission for time served. Yep. So I earned 1.5 years remission, which was normal for anyone with that type of sentence that achieved remission and was given their remission. You didn't always get it at the end of your sentence, depended upon how they paroled you or didn't parole you.
I'm not sure if you gave this as a reason or an excuse, not an excuse, a reason, but you said you had a marriage breakdown and this turned you into doing this. People will say, well, gee, plenty of people face adversity in life, and this is probably the ultimate disgraceful way of showing it, Ray. And I'm not here judging you, and because I appreciate you coming in. But we'll have the naysayers will say, "Oh, why?" It's just interesting, I think, to know how that happens and what went through your mind. And have you ever? Is the woman you did it to ever? Is she still alive? Have you ever made contact with her to express remorse? Have you spoken to her parents? All those things would go through my mind if I think I'd done something like that, Ray.
Yes, no, and sensible and fair questions. Hard to answer them all in one
Yes.
go, but I'll take it. I'll just go back and unlock it a little bit.
Thank you.
Using the excuse of a marriage breakdown was absolute bullshit. The truth was, I had developed into what we would now assess as a sociopath. There's no doubt in the world I was out of control, completely out of control. And
Why were you?
Mainly because I was one of those people who grew up.
Peer group pressure? No?
Look, yeah, that's part of it, but it's not a good enough excuse. Let me just explain
Yes,
it, because
please.
once I do, then it'll
Yep.
make a bit more sense for you. I was one of those guys that grew up as a drinker, and I learned that I wasn't enjoying myself unless I was half pissed. And there were a lot of people in that category, but I was one of those guys that sort of...
You're a bad drunk.
Bad drunk, absolutely bad drunk. Was it being a bad drunk that resulted in why I committed the crime of rape? I'm not certain, because it's so long ago I can't really remember, but I would say there were no excuses whatsoever, except for the fact that I felt entitled. I was an asshole of a person on grog. Couldn't accept no when I should have been able to accept no. Had no justifiable excuses whatsoever. At the time, didn't acknowledge that one little bit and tried my hardest to get out of it.
Were your parents aware of the fact that their son Ray was out of control, or were they oblivious to this?
No, they were separated at the time, and I was running a hotel myself. Like when I say, my father had the Montague Hotel down the road here, and I was the manager of it, so I was sort of in charge of it. No excuses whatsoever.
No,
had
I
everything on
understand
a golden platter, stuffed it up totally.
Drugs weren't
No.
involved? Don't think drugs were around too much. Well, I suppose they were in our day. Well, you're my age, I think,
Look,
aren't you?
I
70,
might be a little
45?
bit older than you. Just
are you?
I'm 80, going on 81, so I'm just a little bit older.
I'm 80 at the end of the year, so we're
Close.
We're
We're
close.
in that
The
category.
only thing different between you and I is that I got some hair.
But is it yours?
It's a very good question. Not much of me is real, right?
No.
Yeah.
No, but you've got enough hair to cover a horse. I'm lucky.
Yeah, that's right.
If I could find any,
So, I'm
That's
I'm
okay.
going. There's much more things I'm going to speak to. I want to get this out of the way first,
sure.
because
Yeah,
people will say,
Why are you interviewing a rapist?
so it was
I
a
know that.
pretty brutal thing you did to that lass.
Absolutely.
And you not only raped her, but you belted around a bit. What went through your mind when you're doing? Did you think this is not a good idea, or I shouldn't be doing this, or I'm going to take it out on her because my marriage is broken down, or you said you felt entitled? Have you ever? Did you ever reach out to the woman? Or were you told not to?
I've got to answer that one in a roundabout way.
Yes, please.
And this is how I'll answer it. When I got out of prison after having served 7.5... Let me just quickly state this, because very few people are aware of this in when it comes to rape.
Yep.
And very few, and because no one wants to be called a rapist, no one talks about it.
Yep.
So here's what happens when you go to trial for the crime of rape. There's your side of the story, you're trying to get out of it. There's their side of the story, and if we come together, there's probably more truthful facts in the centre. Sometimes there's a little bit of exaggeration on both sides. Now, I don't want to go there because I don't want to lessen what I did, and I don't want to sort of downplay it. But once you're found guilty, the first thing that everyone wants to know is, well, did you show remorse?
Yeah.
But our system doesn't work that way.
No.
Our system works this way. The moment you're found guilty, the lawyers straight away say, don't worry, Ray, we're going to appeal this.
Yep.
So you cannot admit that what you have done was wrong. You can't admit it. So therefore, you don't show remorse in the moment.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And that's what happens to people in my situation. So you get sentenced, and then when the appeals are through, then you look at it, I appealed and naturally lost it, because and so I should have.
Yep.
So then it's a matter of, do you then play that game of, hang on, I've said it wasn't me, I didn't do it, I'm innocent. Do you actually play that game, which 95% of crims who have been convicted do?
Yes, exactly.
And I made the choice that no,
but Ray,
I wasn't going to. I was going to admit I did it.
You just said that when you get charged, you try and get out of it.
What? Totally.
So why did you try to get out of it if, in fact, you did this, you knew you did this,
Yep.
The girl knew you did it, why did you try and get out of it? Why didn't you say, well, I've erred and probably I'm going to get what I deserve? Why did you...
Because like everyone who is guilty of a crime that they don't want to own up to...
but why wouldn't you own up to that? Because it was
two
obvious,
reasons.
was it?
Two reasons. No, two reasons. Rape is probably the worst crime that someone in my situation can commit apart from murder.
Yep.
Rape would be the worst of the
Or not
worst.
paying your taxes. No, I don't want to make light of that. That's
No. That's okay. That's okay. No. But so therefore, no one wants to admit that they're the person who's being accused of being a rapist. The second thing, I knew I was going to go to prison because I was arrested immediately.
Yep.
And I spent time in prison before I was bailed and had a month outside. And because of where I lived, the Montague Hotel was a painters and dockers pub. And everyone there, they knew me very well. They said, look, Ray, we can get you overseas. You're mad fronting. And I said, thanks, but I will front it. I will stay around and front it. And make out that I'm innocent and try and beat it, which what people do. And that's what lawyers do when you go to them. The first time I went to, and I won't name the lawyers because they became very, very big deal people in the judicial industry. But the first thing they said is, shut up, don't say a word. If I was in your situation, hypothetically, here's the type of defence I would use. They laid it out for me.
So their bounden duty is to represent...
I needed witnesses to prove it wasn't me. I was elsewhere. And so I went through all that, went through that scam. But blind Freddie knew I was guilty. And the jury, I think, took 2 hours. So everyone knew. It was just madness. It was madness it was in that situation where you thought you could get out of something you didn't deserve to get out of.
Now, Ray, you're obviously a very intelligent and smart person. You've been successful from... those moments on. Why would you? Why would you try and get out of it? Why wouldn't you say, "I'm so sorry. I have." Why would you go through the charade of trying to get out of it?
Yeah, because the lawyers told me that for this crime, if you plead innocent, you'll get 9 off a 7.
Yep.
If you plead guilty and fight it, you'll get anything up to 15 years. And back in those days, if you pleaded innocent when you were guilty and found guilty, you automatically got an extra 2 years because that's what perjury was. You got 2 years for perjury.
Understand.
So I knew that I was facing a minimum of 7 years in prison if I pleaded guilty.
Now, just the last 2 things on this, then I want to move on.
Yeah, sure.
When I said, did you ever show remorse or speak to the girl, I didn't mean while you were leading up to it.
I'm about to go there.
Please.
Yes,
I'll be interested in that.
So when I got out of prison in 1975, this happened in 1967, by the way, and when I got out of prison was 1975. I spent 3 to 4 years going around to schools, talking to school kids about my situation, trying to get them to analyse their situations and make certain they never did anything as stupid as I did and go to prison. I'll just finish this one.
That's interesting.
And I did that for 3 years.
So the education department allowed you or inspired you or advocated you to go around schools with that record?
No, it wasn't. Back in those days, the education department had nothing to do with that. It was up to each school to individually contact you. And schools learned about what I was doing and they contacted me and wanted me to go to them.
I see.
And I went to 50 or 60. I did a lot of schools over the 3 years.
Domestic violence and respect and all that?
Yes. Yes. And the fact that being strong enough, admitting
Yep.
If you have committed rape, then start talking about it, because that's the only way other people are going to assess the situation, maybe say, right, not for me, we'll never go there. And unless we start talking about it, people are never, they're just going to do what I did. So, but here's the reason I'm saying this. One of the schools I went to cancelled, and I didn't know why. And the person who was managing me at the time was then, after a couple of years, a manager came to me and he started organising me going to all these schools. And they said, look, your victim works there. And
really?
Yeah, and that was a big deal for me, and I gave it away straight away. I stopped it straight away. That was it. So I moved in other directions.
And you never
out of respect.
Wrote a letter or I'm not, don't even know what I'm asking you. But
the answer is no. However, I had, when I was released, I had appeared on the Don Lane show, the Peter Couchman show, a whole hour documentary of Susan Brown Miller, the expert on rape. And I had done a lot of television work, a lot of media work, and had written quite a lot had been written about it. So I was known at that time as somebody who was prepared to talk about it, but and even though I had a lot of contact, or a lot of people contacted me who were victims of sexual assault and rapes, and worked with quite a few people, I still didn't want to go that next step of finding out where the victim was, because I thought that was a terrible invasion, and it could have been really traumatic. So I made the choice definitely not to. But I pulled back the moment I heard that, and I thought, oh, gee, okay. And that was a school close to you, I think, too.
A school?
Yeah, I think so.
Where's this?
Down Geelong.
Yeah, grammar or college?
I don't know if it's Geelong Grammar or Geelong College. I think it might have been college.
I see.
But they cancelled the actual me going out to talk to them. Yeah. And I respected that, and I understood it. Totally.
So the Reverend Kevin Toomey, he supported you, did he? He was your priest at
St. Kevin's.
St. Kevin's?
Yes, he did.
He just supported you morally,
No,
not morally. He supported you, realised you'd done wrong, but thought the Lord might enter your body or something, or why did he support you?
Okay,
because you're one of his fold.
Ex-Fitzroy footballer, who used to dye his hair blonde. The first person I ever came across who dyed his hair blonde.
Is that right?
Yeah. Anyway, he was our prison chaplain, and at St. Kevin's, and we had usually at schools there are a couple of groups that become a little bit dominant, and I wasn't a bad sports person. So as a sports person, I'd sort of achieved a few things, a couple of state titles and things like that. And Toomey came to me one day and he said, look, Ray, he said, I'm starting up mass on Wednesdays at lunchtime, and I want to ask you for a favour. Will you and your group come along to the first mass I give? And I'd come through from Pat's Ballarat, which was as bad as it could ever get. And I hated religion, even though I was at this guy. I hated religion, intolerant. And I said, look, yes, I will. And I didn't mind this guy. I thought this guy was a good guy. So I went along, and we all went along, and that was the only time we ever... And we became very close friends. And when I was in my last year at St. Kevin's, I was legally driving a car to school because I lived so far away, and so I had a car, and after training, if it was football or athletics, and Toomey was always there, I'd drive him down to the Tockage on the way home, and we became quite good friends. So when I was found...
I might have run into you down there at some stage at Tockage. I used to frequent the Tockage.
Hey, here's one for you. Did you compete as a schoolboy in the hurdles?
Yeah, I did.
Well, we ran against each other because I was the hurdler for St. Kevin's.
Really?
Yeah, I think you made the A grade, and I don't think I got through. I was in the second division, so you would have been the first division.
That is extra. I was the Victorian
schoolboy
hurdles champion of some age group. I remember going to Olympic Park and doing
very
it.
underrated sports person, and it's. I know you love putting yourself down. No, but you really were, and that's the truth. I know you made the APS football team because I competed against you. And
did you?
It's in Kevin's. I was. Look, I'm 5'10", but I was our ruckman.
Were you?
Because I could jump high. I was a high jumper. Madness, I know, madness. We had 3 guys in that team, by the way, who played league. Phil Wine.
Yes, Phil Wine.
Phil for Hawthorn.
Yeah, I do.
Michael Bowden, who played for Richmond.
Mike Bowden.
And our 19th man was a fellow called Peter Kerr.
I see.
He went on to play for Carlton, and his father was a great player.
He did too.
Yeah, and we won about 2 games.
So, Ray, look, I know we were talking about the bad side of your life, and maybe we should, or because it puts all the other stuff in perspective. Did your mum and dad, did they disown you after the whole...
I did what every bloody coward does. I told them I was innocent. And naturally they believed me, and it was only during my prison sentence where I sort of had to find a way of letting them know, look, I'm not going to play the game anymore. I'm not scared to admit that I deserve to be here. And I made that decision. It took a while, it didn't happen overnight, and I set out to change myself. I knew what had to be changed, and I purposely set out to change. So therefore I let them know the truth. And while they were disappointed, they understood, and they always, never, ever did not support me.
Now, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to get the tug at the heartstrings here, but if you were going to say something to that person, without writing a letter or an open letter, what would you just say to that person that?
I'm so sorry, and I know it's 60 years ago, but gee, not only was I wrong, but I had no right to put you through anything like that, and I did. And at the trial, I tried to make out that you were in the wrong and I was in the right, and I do apologise. It's sincerely. I always have.
Well, you always have when you always have after you decided to take the responsibility.
Yeah, I know. It's always after.
So hard for me to, because I just don't know what goes through people's minds. Haven't quite done anything like that. But so Ray, so while you're at the, when you were released, you got a degree. You studied. Remember, you got a degree on what did you get a degree on? You were
maybe released. I'll take you through that because
mate, why have I got these notes here and I can't read them? This is how I go. You released. You completed a university degree.
Well, what? And look,
why couldn't I remember that?
Look, I know this is what you call. Self-aggrandising.
No, that's all right.
I started in prison and completed in prison, and I was the first ever prisoner to ever do that, a social science degree. So that was in prison. But I had the privilege of having been to university and did physical education prior to going to prison. So I was a phys ed teacher too.
Yes.
And so I had a diploma from Melbourne University. Back in the day where that was the only place you could do phys ed, but it was a university diploma. And
how did you do that degree from prison? Did you have to go into the prison library and access the books, or did you do it through correspondence? Or?
No, it was the hardest thing in the world because people
plenty of time to do it though.
Oh, plenty of time to do it, and well, yes and no. Strangely enough, you don't have a lot of time when you're in prison. To yourself, but the thing was I did do it. It started out that no university in the world wanted to have prisoners doing degrees by correspondence, and the reason was that in England what had happened was the Pakistanis and the Indians were all enrolling in correspondence courses and getting the right to emigrate to England. So this was going to happen worldwide with South Africa and all the universities that offered degrees by correspondence. So no one would take me on to do a degree. And it took me years and years. And I started out doing a diploma from West Australian Institute of Technology in social science. And then they upgraded it to an associateship. So I did another year. And they upgraded the associateship to a degree. So I did 5 years and got a degree in social science from West Australian Institute of Technology.
So then, Ray, you turned your hand to writing and being a literary star.
Not quite star, but I did write.
Literary. If you've got some, for someone to say they're going to get information off the available correspondence that says you're regarded as an important playwright.
Yeah, I probably wrote that myself, though.
No, so. And the reason I'm asking you this, you befriended in jail Christopher Dale Flannery, Mr.
Yes.
Rentakill.
Yes.
And I believe, tell me if this is right, your first play called Every Night, was that about
Second
Christopher
play.
Dale Flannery?
Yes, it was my second play.
Yeah, so what was your first one?
The first play was a play I wrote and directed inside prison called A Blue Freckle.
No, well, I haven't got that down.
That's okay.
A blue freckle.
Yeah, blue freckle.
I could have a stab at what that
Go
means.
on. If you get this one, I will walk a mile in your feet.
No, the only freckle I've ever heard is when you get a kick in the freckle, and it might turn blue if it's overworked. I don't know what a blue freckle means. What's a blue freckle mean?
Well, the idea of it was that no one would know, and that was part of the deal with the play. A blue freckle is the mark that a bullet will leave
I see, yeah.
after it's entered the body.
Yep.
It looks like a blue freckle.
I see.
And it was just my terminology that I invented to describe what that looked like. And I used it as something that my first play I ever wrote was about rape.
Yes.
And because Christopher Flannery had gone to jail for rape,
Yep.
and he'd been verbaled by police despite the fact that he was guilty. That's what very few people are like. He went to jail with another guy called Laurie Prendergast, two well-known prisoners who came. Laurie Prendergast ultimately involved in the Great Bookie robbery.
Yep.
Became very, very big in the Australian criminal scene. Both went to jail when they were 18 for rape. Inside, I got to know Chris really well because we played football inside, Sam.
Yes.
And there were 6 teams inside. And when I first went to prison, I was what's called a squarehead, a first timer. So I was sent to A division.
Yep.
For the first timers. And we had a football team and played 6 other divisions on the weekends. And they used to punch the shit out of us. And I mean, fair dinkum punch the shit out of us. So I had a really good job where I could recruit people to A division. And I finished up getting all the heavies down to A division. I got Chris Flannery and all the heavies down there. And we finished up punching the shit out of them. That's so true. Went on to win the grand final the 2 years I played, and I've still got trophies for bloody football.
You must giggle at the AFL today. I think it's almost touch football at the minute at the AFL, which is probably good in the climate we live in and the litigious world that's going on and the wokeness. I suppose if you like that sort of thing, it's good.
Look, I'm disappointed, sure, but I'm addicted to it.
Yep.
I don't know if you knew. Did you know I worked at Collingwood?
No, Ray, I've got a feeling there's a hell of a lot I don't know about you.
I know, yeah. No, I worked at Collingwood with Tommy Hafey and
Did
as
you?
their fitness guy, yeah.
Did you?
You were at Gillette. In
was.
fact, here's where we met once, and I wouldn't expect you to remember this. The second year I was there, the first year of Tommy was there. When Tommy came in, he sacked everyone and kept me. I was really lucky because I had the same attitude to training that he did. And he kept me on as his fitness guy. And the first thing that we did was they used to have at the exhibition buildings these competitions run for fitness. And Dougie Wade was the guy who set it up.
Yep.
And we had a competition where you had 5 players who all performed exercises to see who ultimately was it. You won it as you were the fittest person that was there that day and were regarded as having won the outstanding athlete for being the fittest person. Collingwood won the actual 6 of us combined, and we took home the prize.
How embarrassing is this, Ray, that you know more about my life than I do?
Yeah, but you probably wouldn't remember that one.
But now that you recall that, I
Dougie
do.
Wade was the actual compere and the judge at the same time. Yeah. I love those days. Those days were fantastic.
Just getting, did Alec Epps, did you
Yep.
run into him at Pentridge? He
Alex-
used to arrange the games, didn't he?
No, he didn't arrange the games. What
Not
Alex?
the games, but
Alex used to come in.
He's a great devotee of trying to help inmates.
And helped me a lot.
Yep.
Alex was one of the best people I've ever met in my life. Alex,
Great Essendon footballer, the Kookaburra.
And from Western Australia, and we became very, very close friends. So he used to bring in Peter Norman, Ron Carlton, who finished up being my athletic coach, used to come in and work with the guys. Our governor, the governor of Pentridge Grindley, who I admired, and I'll never put him down. I'll only put him down for he oversaw H Division and did nothing about it. But apart from that, he was a beautiful person. And his son was a sports person, a cyclist, and he was into sports and was a member of Richmond Football Club and a really big deal. So he first of all brought Tommy in all the time, and I got to know Tommy inside. And then when we clicked later on, I worked 5 years with Tommy.
Were you under the tutelage of a great Geelong man and
Father Brosnan?
Father Brosnan?
Yep.
He was a marvellous man.
Well, I don't know if you've got this down or not, but I was allowed in the last year to go out and compete in the Australian athletic titles and things like that for the decathlon, because I wasn't a bad athlete.
Yep.
Brozzo was the first one to take me out.
Yep.
Despite the fact that we had a lot of run-ins inside.
Did you?
Yes, he expected me to attend church, and I was an atheist, not an agnostic. I was an atheist, and still am, but part agnostic maybe. But Brozzo, despite the fact that we had some terrible run-ins over H Division, but that's another story.
Why is it another story?
Because when they had an inquiry into H Division, the religious people refused to go along and give evidence.
I see.
And I took him to task over that badly. And he deserved to be taken to task. But he was a good guy, Brozzo. I loved him. I love Brozzo. And here's why. The first day he takes me out on a 2-day day leave, because the decathlon goes over 2 days, and I was given permission in my last year, or that 74 to 75, to compete in some Victorian decathlon championships that were being held. And you had to qualify get 6,000 points before you could compete in the Australian titles. Mm-hmm. So the authorities ultimately let me go out and compete. And Brozzo took me out, excuse me, and on the first day, he says, "Ray, look, I've just got to stop at these commission flats. Can you just hang on for a while?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, mate. You know, remember, I've got to be there a certain time, blah, blah." Yeah, Ray. So he comes back, rushes up, takes a box out, comes back, and then drops me off at the athletics and says, "Okay, I'll see you at 5 o'clock." And he's supposed to be looking after me.
Yep.
This is Brozzo. And he trusts, anyway, he turns back up at 5 o'clock. "How'd you go, Ray?" "Yeah, blah, blah." I finished up winning that decathlon.
Did you?
Yeah, it was. I won 2 decathlons when I was inside. Anyway, I said, "Hey, by the way," I said, "who was the person that you had to sort of," and I knew he took a box in, so I knew he was helping someone. He said, "Oh, you wouldn't remember this guy, Ray." He said, "But there's a bloke in B Division who used to get up and give me a bad mouth in the yards, and he had one leg." I said, "Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about." He said, "Well, his wife's been in a bit of trouble." He said, and this was the wife of a guy who used to get up and bag Brosnan in the yards.
Yep.
My attitude no one could say a bad word about Brosnan to me, ever. Beautiful person.
Yep, he was a marvellous man.
Absolutely. Beautiful person.
Now I'm still got this in the back of my mind. Why did you wrote the play about a blue freckle?
Yes.
Because of Dale Flannery?
Well, I wrote it because of police verbal. At the time, police were allowed the opportunity of, if they didn't have enough evidence against somebody who they thought was guilty, they would verbal them, and that was a very common practice. It's been acknowledged now, and we have passed legislation to ensure that doesn't happen, that all records of interview are recorded and have to be acknowledged and signed. Back in those days, the person who took the record of interview off a suspect only had to say, "Well, this is what they said."
Yep.
Now, I had read Chris's transcripts. This is how I first got to know him. He asked me if I'd read his transcripts to see if he had any grounds for appeal. And because I had come from a university background, and even though I'm in a different division, words got around who I am. So I said, yeah, I'll have a look at him, Chris. And I read his transcripts, and he was as guilty as all hell. There's no doubt about it. They both were. But he'd been verbal by the police, and there's no doubt about that. So when I say there's no doubt about that, if you had the luxury of reading him, you would have seen he was verbal by the police, despite the fact he was guilty.
Verbal, just intimidated into...
No, it means that he admitted doing it and gave up his partner for doing it also, when he never said a word to the police. He refused to say anything. In fact, they smashed the shit out of him. He wouldn't say a word. And they just went away and said, here's the confession he made.
I see, so they made it up.
That's what's called a verbal sheet. Yes.
I see.
Yeah. So my first play ever was called A Blue Freckle, but it was really called the verbal. But I knew if I called it the verbal, I'd never be allowed to put it on.
I see.
So I called it A Blue Freckle and spread the word around that a blue freckle was about a genus of Antarctic penguin, knowing that no one would read the play, and they didn't. And when they found out that this was a play about rape, written by a person who was guilty of rape, about police verbal, they did everything they possibly could to have it stopped, but it was too late. And the play went ahead. And that's how I became... I was then invited to join the VCA as a result of that play.
Yeah, we think that means the Victorian... Centre
College
for
of the Arts. Yes. College of the Arts.
College, that's what it is.
VCA, Victorian College of the Arts.
College of the Arts. So you were not the first person, but you drew people aware that there was corruption in the constabulary in Pentridge, or the police were corrupt. They were telling lies about people they took a dislike to.
It was well known.
Yeah,
all I did was bring it together into a stage play.
Yep. And where did that open?
That opened in A Division.
Did it?
Pentridge A Division. Yep. Went for 6 weeks. Invited audiences.
I was going to say invited guests could come in.
Yeah, invited guests. But
well done.
But invited guests were allowed in. Yeah.
And then every night was what was that? You wrote that play about? Well, that says here about Flannery, but
there's
what did Flannery ever confide in you? Things that he'd done that no one ever knew? Is he dead?
Oh, he's definitely dead, Sam.
All right, well, you can't slander or libel the dead.
No, I know. No, we were very close, Chris and I.
What did you chat about, Ray? The things he had done.
Well, you don't chat about those things. It's like talking to some of the people you've interviewed. You don't chat about them, but it's assumed they've been done. You interviewed Mick, didn't you?
Yes.
Well, that's probably one of the greatest accomplishments of all time, what he did.
Yep.
But no one will say that's exactly what he did. No. They'll say, this is what happened and he beat it.
Yeah.
But the world knows what happened, and it was one of the best things that ever happened. And you and I both know that.
Because I've always had a philosophy about doing this, that I just ask questions.
I know.
I don't judge people, but I just ask questions I think people might like to know the answers to.
Yes,
and
I know.
And I think people might like to know how bad was Christopher Dale Flannery? He was an evil person.
Well, you've got to put it into context.
Yep.
He was never the person who he becomes when I knew him in prison. He was an 18-year-old kid.
Oh,
and
yes.
He's like anyone else who comes to your football club and he's a recruit and he's young, but later on he becomes the best there is at what he does, and he's in charge of how it happens. Now, that takes a long time. It doesn't happen overnight. And it would be wrong for me to sort of truncate it in a superficial way, because he was a very good friend of mine, Chris, and I'm one of the few people who's prepared to say that and speak up for him. And while I know he did a lot of bad things, he did a lot of good things. Here's one thing that very few people are aware of, and they don't know. It's advocated that he would kill anyone for money. Now, that was not only bullshit, it was just, that's what you call...
salacious.
Yeah. It's
clickbait.
Police hyperbole. He worked with a guy called Tom Erickson, who I don't know if you ever knew Tom Erickson.
No.
A major private detective in Melbourne, who was sort of quite big in that area. And he worked with Chris. and he would do jobs. Chris would do jobs for him, and one of the jobs they wanted Chris to do, that had been paid by a group of insurance companies, was to give it to the guy who was in charge of the builders' labourers. Who went
Norm
to prison.
Gallagher?
It was to give it to Norm Gallagher. And he goes, why would I fucking give it to Norm Gallagher? He's a terrific person. No one knows that. You know, everyone says, oh no, this guy would do anything for money. Bullshit. He had more principles than the people have ever accused him. And I'll say that.
What was his relationship with Roger Rogerson? I have that written down here.
That was his biggest mistake he ever made, and it was he trusted Rogerson. That was his relationship with Rogerson. He trusted him implicitly. Rogerson, they had pulled off some big deals. They had done some very big crimes.
Rogerson and Flannery, or Flannery and his associates?
It was never just Rogerson and Flannery. It's all of them. Yep. All of them put together. That whole group, Nettie Smith and the whole group of corrupt police and the heavy crims who ran this, and all the people, the McPhersons and the Freemans, the people who ran at the time, the gambling, the brothels, they were the two big ones. That's where the money was, in those two. And the SP, but that had been undermined by bringing in the legal casinos. And Chris and Rogerson became very close.
Because he was his security, because he was a lawman, Roger Rogerson. He was, so he gave him some credibility, because until they found out Roger Rogerson was a crook, or dishonest, or corrupt, he had a sort of a badge of honour knowing Roger Rogerson, because he could, he said, he could smother most of the things, could he?
Yeah, absolutely. He had been given what is called a green light. And that's what I wrote that book about. A green light is when the authorities give one of their own the right to become a legitimate crim and work with the crims. But the deal is you are undermining the crims while you're working with them.
Yep.
Now, Rogerson had that right to work with the crims, the Nettie Smiths and all, but he ultimately became one of them.
Absolutely. So you wrote 3 trilogies, I said, in the one book called the Green Light.
A Green Light.
A Green Light. I've got that.
Yeah.
And one was the Kingdom of Children, the Kingdom of Men, and
The Kingdom.
The Kingdom.
Yes.
What was the subtle difference between all those things?
The Kingdom of Children is basically my story growing up, going through boarding school, ultimately being in the pub system and then ending up in prison. The Kingdom of Men is my story plus Chris's story in prison.
Yep.
The Kingdom is how it all operated outside.
Yep.
In other words, corruption outside, because there was a place that you were probably never allowed in called Mickey's Disco. Down in St Kilda.
No, I've never.
No, that's where all the crims used to hang out and the coppers used to hang out, and it's where it all happened. It was sort of like, and Chris had ultimately had shares in it, but he didn't know that it had been set up by the police, because people are given a green light to work with heavy crims on the condition they find out the truth of what's really happening.
The Ethics of Evil.
Yes.
Another work of yours.
The Ethics of Evil was, I got sent to Hates Division in my 4th year.
That's serious, because you were a rebel, is that right?
Yes, I'm only being smart. I got sent there because I was a spokesperson.
Dissent.
For prisoners during a riot period.
Yes.
Dissent, of course. Yeah. And
didn't ever get put in the hole, did you? Or isn't there such a thing as the hole in Pentridge?
There were holes.
Did you get put in
no, not in
a room and locked up for 23 hours?
Yes.
Yep.
In solitary, like in Hates Division.
That's right.
Hates Division was as bad as it comes.
Yep.
You had to break rocks with sledgehammers, and I'd always set myself up, never thinking I'd go to Hates Division, ever. Yep. And saying to people, if I go down there's no way in the world I'm going to break rocks, blah, blah, blah. a big tough Mooney.
Yeah.
Of course, then I end up in Hayes Division.
Breaking rocks.
No, I
you
refused
didn't.
to.
No, you
I
refused
wouldn't
to.
break rocks. And no matter how much they bashed me, and they did, they tried everything.
So was this in the days of Ronald Ryan? Because
No, it's after Ronald Ryan.
you
Ryan.
were after Ronald Ryan.
Oh, yes,
He's
Ronald
in the
Ryan was hung in
50s.
67. And I went in 68.
68. Well,
Yeah.
Well, yes, he was.
Just after, yeah.
So Brosnan was
Brozzo was there all that period.
quite a. I'm not sure if he was a supporter of Ronald Ryan's, but he felt, he tried to instill the Lord into him just before he was hanged.
The other thing about Brozzo, and I say this in a nice positive way, he was the best person of understanding PR I've ever come across.
He was indeed. Yeah, no,
So he told a
I
few
understand.
stories about Ronald Ryan, and you put him in the PR category.
So, Gangsters with Badges, is that about corrupt coppers?
That's about, that's about the Wall Street killings.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, that's taken a turn. That's suddenly, have I got this wrong? Is the Wall Street killings, has that suddenly turned out to be not quite as the people involved, not quite uncertain if they were involved, or have I got that wrong?
No, you've got that right. What happened?
Is that anything to do with Gobbo or no?
No, nothing to do with.
it,
Oh no. No, that was to do with a group of people who were very much related to a lady called Kath Pettingill.
Oh, yep, absolutely.
So
yep.
and Dennis Allen
Yep.
and those people who was related to Fred Cook.
Aye.
And there's a bit of an integration there.
And I tell you this, Ray, I walked into Fred Cook's hotel, the station hotel, one Sunday morning, and there was Dennis Allen. I can't think of the other two brothers. They got a street not named after them, but there's a street in Port Melbourne called their name. There were 6 of them, 5 of them sitting around. I walked in, and they had their guns, their pistols on the table. Which I walked in, and they were drinking scotch, and this is Sunday morning, and wow. And I said to, I think it was Dennis Allen, I said to, where's Fred? And they said, he's upstairs. So I went up, they had beaten the shit out of him. He was in a crumpled mess behind a door up in the office. Yeah. And I said, what the fuck? I said, I'll get an ambulance. He said, please don't call an ambulance or anything. They nearly killed him. And he said, just leave. He mumbled, just leave.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to, so I walked out, and I remember saying this. I know I don't think I've been told anyone this. I've told my friends this. I walked out, and I said to one of them, as I walked out, I said, well, aren't we big strong men? Aren't we big strong men? And I walked out, and the bloke, I don't know if it was Dennis Allen, but I walked out, and he said I would leave right now if I was you. And I thought, I'll get to the front door. If I can get to the front door without them shooting me in the back of the head, I got out into the Station Street, and I got in my car, and I drove around the corner, and I sat there for about 10 minutes. I honestly nearly had a breakdown. I've never been so shit scared in my life. Yeah. But I thought if I didn't say something, to walk at that poor old Fred. Anyhow, that's the only contact I had with those people.
Yeah, no. And by the way, that's courageous. It is. It is courageous, Sam. It is. It is. No, it is.
Just please, I don't want to be considered courageous, but to not say something about a friend of yours who's up there, and those boys are sitting there with those. They had the guns on the table, and I said, "Wow, aren't we big strong people?"
Yeah, no,
I thought they were actually going to shoot me.
Well, if they were out of their fucking faces, they would have.
Yeah.
I had a run-in with Alan once, and the guy couldn't hold his hands up either.
No.
But the people around him could.
Yep.
I know who you're talking about. The people around him could.
Yes.
Yeah. No, arseholes. They were.
Yeah. Bad actors in society.
Yeah.
So the month of the dog. I'm interested in these titles. The month of the dog.
Mouth of the dog. Mouth of the dog. That's okay.
How am I going?
Yeah. That's fine.
It's mouth. It's got. I've got written down here mouth.
Month of the dog.
Mouth of the dog.
That's a better title. The month of the dog.
No, the mouth of the dog. Yep.
That's about police. That's about informers. A book on informing.
So the point of me mentioning all those, Ray, you are a wealth of knowledge about what goes on in this world, and people hitherto pay lip service to all this stuff, but you've been in amongst it, and you're articulate and learned enough to write about it. I'm not. People who watch this, I'm not trying to make you a hero out of anything, but you have rehabilitated yourself after an horrendous act that you've spoken about openly, and people will say, "Oh, why do you interview people like not you?" But I get every. You got a story to tell. You can't change what you've done, but you can maybe explain things and how you've survived. People say, I'm successful. I'm not successful. I'm just a survivor like you, like we're all survivors. Relationships, do you have any? You're married? Yeah.
I've been with my partner for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And the best person in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky.
And are you respected in your... people know who you are, they respect you? And,
totally.
Yeah.
Look, I taught for 30 years.
Yep.
In creative writing, professional writing, in different institutions, and I always made a point of letting people know in a roundabout way, because sometimes you had to do it very carefully, my background, and gave them the choice of, if they didn't want to ever work with me, or they didn't like what the situation was, then there's no problems whatsoever with them not wanting to, and I had ways of letting them know, so that, because my attitude to encouraging writing was to get them to write about sexual assault, and to go into it further, so that we know about it and we let the world know in the best way possible, rather than leaving it as headlines, which we often do.
Well, now, Ray Mooney, I know what people will say about this interview. They'll say, well, they will, but you're an interesting person, and you've paid for the horrendous thing you've done. You're remorseful. No point saying anything more about that, but you've rehabilitated yourself, and you've written some very readable and important works that someone said you're a very important playwright, novelist and screenwriter. And I know you didn't write that, because I've read all the adjuncts that have come in the Wikipedia. So I want to appreciate you for coming in, Ray Mooney, and you've been on You Cannot Be Serious. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, Sam. Thanks very much.
Thank you.